The state does provide for some alternatives. So if those timelines don't work for your individual jurisdiction, or there's some anxiety about potential refunds, then there is an alternative route that jurisdictions can take if they implement certain time-saving measures. And there's a couple of them here that are examples, but there are others. So for public hearings, if for your zoning code, you only require a public hearing if it is required from state statute. That is a measure that you could implement instead of providing refunds. If you have pre-submittal meetings be a optional item rather than required, that is an item that you could implement instead of issuing refunds. And then additionally, if you outright permit housing uses. So, for instance, cottage housing in the R10 zone is a conditional use permit if you have 5 or more cottage homes. If instead you just make housing an outright permitted use, then this would be a way to expedite permitting and create that housing faster and meet this state statute requirement. And there's some additional items that we're considering for modification outside of that 5290, including applicant response time, design review board measures, informational signage, and some housekeeping items. So for applicant response time, we do get applicants where we send a review letter, and typically now they have 90 days to respond in some manner. But we do get applicants that do not respond during that 90-day period, and then their permit can lapse. That can create a fairly long permit queue of people waiting for their permits and not necessarily tending to them in a way that is proactive for that permit to be issued in a timely manner. Other jurisdictions have adopted a 60-day applicant response period where applicants, once again, they need to check in with the city or jurisdiction and let them know that they are working on getting those items that have been requested to the city. The Planning Commission might consider a 60 rather than 90-day response time. The Design Review Board. So there's a number of changes that might benefit the Design Review Board, but first and foremost, currently a permit has to go through several rounds of review before you can get to a building permit. So that could include site plan review and SEPA when it's applicable for larger projects. So you'd have to go through that permit and appeal process. You'd have to go through a design review for a conceptual conference for a first review meeting with the design review board, and then an additional design review board meeting where they have a response conference to again view your materials, each one of those having a public meeting and public comment period, and then a site development permit where you can install any type of infrastructure that may be needed, and then a building permit. Currently, the way that the code is written, at that building permit review, those are still subject to appeal from outside. If someone comments on that permit, then they can then appeal that decision, even though it's been through a very large amount of public process already. And this creates uncertainty in the development process, that if you have someone that wants to build a project, then you can go through several months or more of permitting only to be appealed, have an opportunity for appeal at the end of the process. So it creates uncertainty. The Planning Commission might consider altering that code section to remove public comment from the building permit. And then some additional modifications for informational signage. So if you're ever walking through your community and something appears to be happening, there's some bulldozers or some buildings being constructed, People want to know what it is. And so we're proposing to add a new section to the code where if your development is of a certain size, it wouldn't be for a single family home, but if you're building like a commercial building or, some yet to be determined trigger, then you need to provide a sign on your site conveying what is planned for the future. This wouldn't offer a public comment period or an appeal period. This is just to let you know what's going on in your community. Once again, the intent for the state is to provide a more streamlined process, not to create additional barriers by adding potential appeal periods, but having a sign just for basic information to make sure that you have an informed community is a step in the right direction, potentially, that the Planning Commission should consider. And some housekeeping items. And maybe it didn't warrant a slide, but there are some definitional updates that are required. We have, for instance, a short subdivision committee that's referenced in 2002, and there isn't a committee that exists by that name. So just some basic cleanup items that you might expect to see in any legislative markup, the next workshop.